You know that cup of coffee you're probably holding right now? Well, it has a story. And believe me, it's a wild one. We're talking about a story that toppled empires, fueled revolutions, and literally built the modern world, all one cup at a time. So, let's dive in and uncover the incredible journey behind our daily brew.
And every great story has a beginning, right? Well, for coffee, it all starts here. Not with a roasted bean, but with these, coffee cherries. Yeah, that's right. It's inside this little fruit that the seed of a global phenomenon is just waiting to get out.
But what's the real story here? Because it's so much more than just a seed that gets roasted and ground. This little bean has shaped our modern world in ways we probably never even stopped to think about.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll follow its path through 5 key stages. First, as a revolutionary brew. Then, how empires were built on beans, how it fueled the modern world, became a massive global machine, and finally, what the future might hold for this little bean.
All right, first up, coffee as a revolutionary brew. Now, long before it was our morning kickstart, get this. It was used by Sufi monks back in the 15th century to stay awake for midnight prayers. They were literally seeking divine consciousness. So from these really spiritual origins, coffee's influence started to spread, moving from the monastery out into the marketplace. But its real revolution, that was about to happen in public.
And this is where things get really interesting, because the new coffee houses were a total game changer. Before them, where did people hang out? Alehouses, right? Places for alcohol, a bit of fun. But coffee houses? They offered something completely new. A space fueled by caffeine, not booze. And that created this whole atmosphere of sobriety and, serious intellectual debate.
And check out this quote from back in the late 17th century. It just captures the vibe perfectly. For a single penny, you got a cup of coffee and access to a whole world of news, business, and conversation. It's no wonder they became known as penny universities. Basically, these incredible new spaces for learning and discussion that were open to pretty much anyone. And the impact of these places? Absolutely staggering. Think about it. The very foundations of modern finance, we're talking the London Stock Exchange, Lloyd's of London, they were born in coffee houses. No joke. Even revolutionary plots, like the Boston Tea Party, were hatched over a cup of coffee. Wild, right? But as coffee's popularity just exploded, this engine of innovation, it also powered something much, much darker. Because as soon as empires realized there was serious money to be made, it led to an absolutely brutal chapter in coffee's history.
Okay, this next quote it's deeply disturbing. It's from a Brazilian politician in the 1880s, and it just lays bare the brutal reality of the coffee trade. Now, the word he uses is a slur today, but it was common back then, and it directly links the entire coffee industry to the dehumanization of enslaved people. This wasn't some footnote in the story. It was the very foundation the industry was built on.
So from the Caribbean to Latin America, the world's thirst for coffee was quenched by the immense suffering of millions. Right alongside sugar and cotton, coffee became one of the key cash crops of the colonial slave economy. It's a really dark legacy that is, honestly, part of the story in every single cup.
So after fueling empires, coffee's next big role was to power a completely new era of human history, the Industrial Revolution. It literally became the fuel that powered the modern world.
Think about it. Factories needed to run 24/7, right? Well, coffee was the perfect tool to make that happen. It boosted energy, it made night shifts possible, and it basically allowed workers to switch from the natural rhythms of farming to the relentless clock time of the factory floor. And that's where the coffee break comes from. It replaced old-school meal times to keep the machines of industry humming along.
And get this, coffee even went to war. Instant coffee was actually scaled up for military use in World War I to give soldiers a boost right there in the trenches. By World War II, it was a strategic staple. And it was this military use that got an entire generation hooked on instant coffee, which is why it exploded in popularity back home after the war.
And A Soldier's Letter from 1918 really captures this perfectly. He's talking about being in the middle of all that chaos and misery, and how that quick, simple cup of coffee gave him a moment of comfort, a moment of focus. It really was a small but, a vital piece of the war effort. So that brings us to the modern era, where coffee is just this massive global machine. But for all its incredible scale, this machine still runs on a really deep and persistent economic imbalance.
Just look at that number. Over 178 million bags? That's forecasted for the next couple of years. It's honestly hard to even wrap your head around the scale we're talking about here.
Coffee is a true global commodity, produced and consumed on a level that is just staggering.
And as you can see, a few key players pretty much dominate that whole machine. Brazil is still a powerhouse, followed by Vietnam and Colombia. So all this production is really concentrated in just a handful of regions, all serving a massive global demand.
But here's the problem. You've heard of fair trade, right? The system designed to make sure farmers get better prices. Well, even for coffee grown under those standards, less than half of it, only 40%, is actually sold on those better terms. So there's this huge gap between all the ethical coffee being produced and what we're actually buying.
And this really is the central tension in the industry today. On one side, you have the producers saying, hey, we need a higher minimum price to cover our rising costs and, earn a living wage. But then the industry worries that if prices go up, consumers will just switch to cheaper, non-certified coffee, which could end up hurting the very farmers everyone's trying to help. It's a really, really tough balancing act.
So where does coffee go from here? Well, for our final section, let's look at how science and sustainability might just hold the answer.
Okay, check this out. There's this incredible species called Coffea humboldtiana. It's a coffee plant that naturally grows without any caffeine because it's just missing the gene to produce it. How cool is that? This just shows us there's this huge, untapped genetic diversity in coffee that could lead to all sorts of new, innovative brews without a bunch of industrial processing.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big question, right? We've seen how the story of coffee really is the story of our world. From revolutionary debates to the horrors of slavery, from fueling industry to facing these huge modern economic challenges. So the question now is, can we use innovation not just to create new tastes, but to finally build a truly fair and sustainable system for every single person involved in bringing us that daily cup?